Exactly 5 years since Hurricane Maria battered Puerto Rico, knocking out power to many on the island for months, some for more than a year. A far smaller Hurricane Fiona managed to cut power to more than 1 million people and access to clean water for almost half the population before even making landfall. It was a reminder to many of the reality Puerto Rican residents have long lived with: a fragile infrastructure and little help from the mainland U.S., a country of which Puerto Rico is a part, a territory. It's a fact far too many seem to constantly forget, even after Maria and a federal response that included a paper towel tossing photo op from then President Donald Trump and a Twitter battle with then San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulin Cruz, a battle she did not wage quietly.
While the American people have had a big heart, President Trump has had a big mouth, and he has used it to insult the people of Puerto Rico. Mr. Trump, do your job. Lives are at stake. This is not about politics. This is not about your ego.
While Trump and Cruz are both out of office this time around, many of the core issues remain. I'm joined by Carmen Yulin Cruz, who's now a fellow at Mount Holyoke College, focused on leadership. Mayor, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know you've been in regular touch with leaders and others in Puerto Rico. What are conditions on the ground?
Well, as you mentioned this morning, 80% of the people did not have electricity. What I want people to understand is that we don't want electricity to take hot showers. There are people already clamoring because they are not able to take their dialysis, right, or they're not able to take their nebulizers or use oxygen because their generators are giving up. And like you mentioned, 55% of the people do not have water. In many places in Puerto Rico, when you lose the electrical power, you lose the ability to get water. My parents, for example, that live in a town in the metropolitan San Juan area, not in San Juan, just received water and electricity this morning. In my apartment, where I still hold in Puerto Rico, which is in San Juan, we have scarcely water, but no electricity. So things are very touch and go right now.
How far along in the recovery from Maria were most parts of the country, the infrastructure, the other things that were so badly damaged?
Well, obviously not far enough. And you know, it was true that President Trump did a lot of things to curtail the aid that needed to get to Puerto Rico, even withholding it. But it's also true that 5 years have been lost of making sure that especially the microgrid in Puerto Rico is robustly reconstructed, and that transformation happens from just oil into solar power, which is of course a lot more resilient than just oil. It is evident that we as a society did not do everything that could be done, and this was in the hands of the central government of Puerto Rico, which is why I am calling this administration to channel all of the aid through the 78 municipalities directly to the mayor so that they can do things faster and better.
You know, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but when I read the other day a comment of yours, I assumed you were manipulating the numbers. I apologize. I heard you say something like $9 billion was allotted to deal with the electrical grid, finally, under Trump, and then only $40 million had been spent. And I went to check it. $40 million has been spent, and it went further. $21 billion was allotted for overall public projects. Only 2% of that has been allotted, according to GAO's Homeland Security Office. Where is the incredible disconnect, Mayor?
And first of all, it's interesting because you're right in disbelieving that. One cannot fathom that would happen with the dire situation that Puerto Ricans lived after the passing of Hurricane Maria. The disconnect is a couple of things. Number one is it doesn't matter who does it. Whenever you weaponize for political reasons aid, these things are going to happen. And the central government of Puerto Rico has really hoarded the funds, saying, no, we're going to use them, we're going to distribute them. And that adds another layer of bureaucracy, number one. Number two, there doesn't seem to be and I'm going to call it a cookie cutter, robust program for reconstruction. For example, if we have to build and reconstruct community centers around Puerto Rico, why do we have to have one community center being designed by one architect in one town and the same thing replicated in 77 other towns? So there are things that could be done differently. And the other thing is really the lack of will to break through the barriers that need to be pushed away if we want to look for permanent solution to recurring problems, and the structural changes that need to take place, like the one that needs to take place in the electrical grid. And that's on us. That's not on the federal government.
You know, the rhetoric, as an outsider, the rhetoric has obviously been far stronger and more supportive from the Biden administration. Has there been a dramatic improvement in terms of support and aid?
There is one great improvement, which is that the goal is to save lives. And when you have that goal, everything else falls into place. Of course, only yesterday it stopped raining in Puerto Rico. And right now, the first 72 to the first week, you're really on a rescue mission, which is why some people, FEMA just pushed a lot of people down to Puerto Rico for the rescue mission. Right now, there's another expected to rain the entire weekend in Puerto Rico, which will make matters even worse with a lot of flooding. So what we are looking for is there is 300 people from FEMA there in Puerto Rico, but the aid has to start flowing. So far, what I hear from mayors is that has not taken place.
You know, I'm not the only person who, when we heard Trump's comments about Puerto Rico after Maria, were pretty clear he had no idea what the relationship of Puerto Rico was to the United States, no idea that they were citizens. And while maybe his behavior, I think it's fair to say from my perspective, was born of both ignorance and racism, because Puerto Ricans aren't from Norway, for example. On the ignorance front, I'm not so sure, I don't have data to present, I'm not so sure the American people understand much better that even with fewer rights, that people in Puerto Rico are citizens of the United States. Am I wrong in that regard?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think we struggle ourselves to understand our relationship with the United States, especially in times like this. For example, we don't understand why the USVI, which is a few miles from Puerto Rico, has a total exemption for energy purposes from the Jones Act, but we don't have an exemption from the Jones Act at a time like this, let alone forever.
What's the Jones Act do, quickly, Mary?
The Jones Act requires everything that comes into Puerto Rico to either come through a flag, through a ship that has a U.S. flag,
I see, okay.
or if it's a foreign flag, they have to decide which port they go to first. So of course, if you have 3.2 million people and you have 300 million people, you're going to come to the U.S. port first. So it is a difficult relationship. We are U.S. citizens by birth since 1941. If you ask most Puerto Ricans, they're going to tell you, no, I'm Puerto Rican, and we define ourselves as Puerto Rican. We have a big population of Puerto Ricans there in Boston and all over the United States. But times like this make it a lot clearer that, and I don't like to talk about the political status of Puerto Rico in a crisis, but I also don't want to be disrespectful to you. Times like this call for a real consensus on moving forward a process of self-determination for the people of Puerto Rico. Well, the options are clearly defined, and then a new relationship can be established, because I think it's safe to say most Puerto Ricans want to have some sort of a relationship with the United States.
But you don't support statehood. What is that relationship that you think would make it less likely that nightmares like this would happen again?
Well, I prefer a free association compact like the U.S. has with other former territories. But more important than what I prefer is what is going to give Puerto Rico the tools to depend less on federal money and to have an economy that can participate more in the U.S. economy. For example, many years ago, Puerto Rico was the mecca of pharmaceuticals. 13 out of the 21 most used products and drugs in the world were made in Puerto Rico. Most people do not know that the majority of the IVs that are used for the armed forces are made in Puerto Rico. So we can contribute to the United States by becoming a pharmaceutical mecca, but also by holding our own. I think it's fair to say that, for example, when you look at the electrical grid and you look at the data, $9 billion and only $20 million used, we need to look at that very differently. Right now, if you look at Puerto Rico, the grid is just one big grid. So let's divide that grid into 4 grids so that if the light and electricity goes down in Ponce, in the southern part, it doesn't affect San Juan in the northern part.
You know, before you go, of all the video that I've seen, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to the passing of the Queen, but usually the story of Puerto Rico was in a little box in the bottom right-hand corner. But in the moments when Puerto Rico got the attention it deserved, I can't erase the image of a man standing in the middle of ruin a few days ago, practically crying, describing what it was like to have spent 5 years rebuilding his neighborhood. And as he and his neighbors approached completion, or at least an important stage, it all came tumbling down. To get through that requires a huge amount of resilience. I don't have it in me. How do your friends and family, how do they get through nightmare after nightmare and continue to survive and hopefully prosper?
And let me put this in perspective. In the 5 years we have gone through Zika, chikungunya, 2 major hurricanes, political unrest, bankruptcy, 2 major earthquakes, the pandemic, and now this. So if you look at resilient in the Webster Dictionary, there should be a picture of Puerto Rico right there, and that should redefine what resiliency is. You take a hold of your faith, you look at your neighbors, and you know that there's no plan B, that you have to do what must be done to push on, because after all, the strength lies within each one of us. I'm going to Puerto Rico tomorrow on Friday to spend a week there to help fellow mayors. If it's a broom that I have to pick to get some of the mud out of the street, that's what I will do. But it is at times like this where the human spirit soars real high. But the thing is that we need to look for permanent solutions to these recurring problems.
Understood.
Because there is some sort of fatigue. The soul of the Puerto Rican people is ready to fight, but it's also fatigued and saddened.
Good luck to you and good luck on your trip. Thanks so much. It's really good to see you.
Thank you very much for not forgetting us. Appreciate it.